Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
You guys did a good job, you know. Those guys were Chunin Nuknin from Kirigakure, known as the Demon Brothers. Asuma's pride in his students was audible. Not many rookie genin squads could have hoped to do as well when put into a combat situation involving other ninja. The audible pride did its work in making Naruto feel good about himself. There really was nothing else like knowing that your teacher was proud of your abilities. It was probably only second to beating that same teacher into the ground. That was vindication. He was pretty far from that point, though. The group was steadily making their way to Wave Country, and Naruto could already smell the sea salt permeating the air. They must be getting close. He wouldn't deny being a little excited. He had never been outside of Konoha before becoming a ninja, and his travels had yet to take him to the sea. Even so, the excitement that accompanied visiting new places was dampened by the circumstances surrounding it. He had no desire to be on this mission. Asuma had assured him and the team that proper reinforcements were on the way, but Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to go horribly wrong on this mission. He didn't like the idea of retreating any more than his teammates, both prideful and headstrong in their own rights, but they weren't ready to face anything of Jonin caliber. Konoha's doctrines on teamwork stated that 3 well-coordinated genin could disable a jonin. They couldn't disable a jonin that they didn't know about, couldn't see, or was just so overwhelmingly powerful that they couldn't touch him. The blonde had little doubt that the jonin they would face would confront them head-on. He glanced to his sides briefly. Neither Kiba nor Ino seemed worried in the slightest. Asuma's word was final, and they had supported this endeavor to being with. All was right in the world for them. Naruto was a little disappointed with Ino. Given her attention seemed to be on him these days, more often than not, he had hoped she would be a little more receptive of his idea. Alas, it was not to be. He supposed that was par for the course with his fellow blonde. He never really could get a read on her. So, how big is this bridge of yours, Tazuna-san? The man chuckled heartily. It's quite the monstrosity, sensei. Some of my finest work, if I do say so myself. The man had obvious pride in his accomplishment. Asuma continued to take drags from his cigarettes. You didn't answer the question though. How big is it? You'll be seeing it soon, Jonin-san. I wouldn't want to ruin the surprise. Asuma just rolled his eyes at the man's intransigence. He dropped back to Naruto's spot in the group, allowing Kiba and Ino to take his place. Naruto's position was always at the back of the group. He was rear support. It seems that I haven't satisfied your fears about this mission, Naruto, he began. He gave the blonde an appraising eye. I can't shake this bad feeling, sensei, Naruto replied tersely. I've had it since the Demon Brothers attacked. He had a bad feeling about the mission as a whole. It didn't help matters that natural paranoia was making him a bit shifty. He kept expecting an Akatsuki member to pop out of nowhere and grab him. Having no idea what any of them looked like wasn't helping him either. Having so much time to think was making him more shifty than he'd like to admit. You've never had doubts like this before, Naruto. You might just be shaken from your fight. I know I was when I first killed a shinobi. There was no doubt in the boy's mind that he was shaken from when he killed the Chunin Nuknin. He had lost himself fully in the fight and could barely remember the killing blow. He didn't want to become so desensitized to killing that this feeling of numbness became normal. He wouldn't readily admit it to anyone, but he was scared of the demon fox in his gut. The thought of becoming anything remotely close to it was utterly repulsive and terrifying. An amoral, emotionless killer was much too close for his liking. That wasn't the problem, though. Not the only one. It's not that, Asuma-sensei. We're walking into a situation where we don't know what's coming. Naruto exclaimed quietly. He didn't want to alert his other teammates to his jitters any more than he had to. I feel like we're walking into a trap headfirst without having any sort of plan or guarantee of safety. He was doing his best to put his sensei on guard and let him know that something was terribly wrong without giving anything away. He had always done his best to keep his knowledge of Akatsuki secret, as it was as far-fetched an idea as there ever was. Honestly, whoever heard of a group of S-class criminals targeting people like him? Aside from the Kyuubi, he was a nobody. That thought had given him pause more than once. The shady group was likely after the biju sealed inside him, and that meant nothing good for him. Asuma raised a stunned eyebrow. His best student had never struck him as being the scared type. In retrospect, he supposed it was a good thing. It was better to be worried about your own well-being than to have such unshakable confidence in your own skills so as to walk boldly into the face of danger, at least at this point in his career. It showed that the boy knew his limits well. He couldn't take a jonin in the event that something happened to Asuma, and he knew it. The chain smoker couldn't say the same about his other two charges. On a different note, there was little doubt that Naruto would be forced to take missions where he didn't know the potential outcome from the beginning. Mission briefings weren't always perfect, and shinobi walked into the unknown more often than not on higher-level missions. As a shinobi, he would need to have the confidence to face unknown assailants and situations. He'd never make it otherwise. As you get older and get higher up in the ranks, Naruto, you'll be forced to take missions where you don't know the full scope of the situation. Are you going to decline these missions just because you're scared? Asuma asked. But that's different, the boy hissed. He knew he was wrong the moment the words left his mouth. Is it really? Asuma asked rhetorically. The mission changed once we knew that shinobi would be gunning for us. When the mission began, you had all the confidence of Kiba and Ino that we'd succeed. The only difference between this mission and others that you'll take in the future is that the unknown was thrust on you in the middle of this one, rather than at the beginning. Naruto nodded absently, trying to wrap his head around the idea of not always having enough information. In reality, this wasn't so different from his situation with the Akatsuki. With the shadowy group, all he could do was train endlessly in the hopes that when they made their move, he would be strong enough to stop them. If he wasn't, there wasn't going to be much he could do about it. It was a bit depressing to think about, but it was the truth. He'd just have to get that much stronger. The same applied to missions. If he wouldn't always know what awaited him, all he would be able to do was get better so that he'd be able to face the unknown head-on. For now, he'd have to trust his team and his sensei. I think I understand, sensei, he answered. He gave Asuma a shaky smile. He was far from comfortable with the situation. Asuma himself probably wouldn't last very long against an S-ranker, but there was little he could do about it except be as prepared as possible. Good. That said, your worry shows that you know your limits. At your level, you should be worried about potentially fighting a jonin. Knowing your limits is a good thing, though you should have some more faith in your dear old sensei. Asuma lifted his head proudly. I'm stronger than you think. Naruto chuckled along with the jonin, most of his fears pushed to the side. That was just like him, trying to assuage the fears of his charges while simultaneously acknowledging their fears as valid. It made them feel both validated and safe at the same time. Are you really? I did some research on you, said Naruto with a smirk. His comfort level was back to almost normal. Did you really? Asuma had little doubt that was the case. The blonde was a great scavenger for information when he wanted to know something. It was a surprising but useful trait for the boy to have. And what did this research of yours find? That you're ranked somewhere between 12 and 15 in terms of the village's strongest ninja. Two raised eyebrows met the blonde's statement. And how do you figure? Naruto cracked his neck. Well, the Hokage ranks at the top, obviously, with the two remaining Sannin coming in after him at 2 and 3. That was the obvious answer, though it was debatable considering the Sandame's age and whether or not Tsunade was still a part of the village. Asuma wondered where he had gotten the knowledge about the Sannin. They weren't the most commonly touched on subjects at the academy. After them, Konoha has 8 registered elite jonin. Both Madogai and Hatake Kakashi fall within that range of 4 through 11, though I'm not exactly sure where. The other 6 spots are taken up by various ANBU personnel. Naruto shrugged at Asuma's look. The man's eyebrows were threatening to take flight. How did the boy know that? I couldn't find any information on them, so I assumed that their files had been classified. Color Asuma impressed. He had no idea that his student was such an adept at information gathering. That was doubly so, considering that the information on Konoha's elite jonin was classified B rank. It would take some serious stealth and infiltration skills to come by that information, especially as nobody in the village would willingly part with it, given who Naruto was. The boy had a future as an infiltration specialist if he was reading things right. Anyway, that put you outside the top 11 in the village, but you served as one of the 12 shinobi guardians of the Fire Lord. While not the most prestigious position, just a colorful bodyguard really Asuma made a noise of offense. He took pride in his tours of duty guarding the daimyo. It shows that you've got some serious skill. The daimyo is picky about who guards him, Naruto finished with a shrug. He had come by all the information in his various digs through the upper sections of the archive when he was researching the Uchiha clan, Madogai, and Asuma, when the man became his sensei. He had become pretty good at sneaking around as a result. The rest of the information had been pieced together from various, unassuming tidbits he had found in a variety of different sources. They all formed a rather cohesive whole when put together, and some reasonable assumptions were made. While Asuma was certainly impressed with his student's information-gathering skills, not to mention his deductive reasoning abilities, there was a flaw. It was one that many people made when mentally ranking shinobi. I hope that you know that your rankings don't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things, Naruto. The boy looked slightly offended. I don't mean to say that your facts are wrong, the opposite really, but aside from the Sannin and Hokage, I'd take my chances against any one of those 8 elite jonin. Naruto looked surprised. Asuma couldn't blame him. The rank of elite jonin wasn't handed out like a party favor. It took some serious skill and hard work to be acknowledged as one of the village's true elite. There's quite a bit that goes into a ninja fight. There are details, hidden ones that can often decide the outcome in a way that might not be expected. It's small details like how people's elements match up, a long-ranged opponent versus a short-ranged one, and other things like that can change a fight. Naruto nodded. That made sense. Unfortunately, it also renewed his worries about the mission. Their next opponent would only have to worry about killing Tazuna as an objective. How would Asuma stack up against someone when he had 3 genin and a civilian to worry about? It's huge, Ino breathed. They were currently passing through the water that separated Wave Country from Fire Country. Tazuna's monstrosity had just come into view. Naruto had to agree with the girl. His respect for Tazuna had just gone up a notch. It didn't mean much, considering how low the man was in his esteem before, but the size of Tazuna's creation was awe-inspiring. How long did it take to build? He asked the bridge builder. Nearly a year, the man answered proudly. He took great pride in his work. According to the calculations, about 1 to 2 months remain for construction. It was impressive to say the least, but something just didn't make sense to Naruto. Tazuna-san, if Gato is after your head because of this bridge, why has he waited so long to do something about it? Surely it makes more sense to nip something like this in the bud early on. Tazuna nodded at the question. A good point. Gata's business relies on the fact that people fear him. He crushed Wave's spirit a long time ago. He probably didn't think that enough people would have the courage to stand against him in order to build the bridge. The ferryman's statement about being quiet due to Gata's men patrolling suddenly made a lot more sense. It was a sobering thought that one man could so effectively crush a country. At the same time, it was a point in Tazuna's favor that he managed to inspire enough people to get the bridge built to this extent. Naruto's respect for the man went up again. Say what you will about the man, but he and his bridge represented a hope for a whole country to rally behind. Why haven't you hired ninja before? You know, to deal with the Gata problem? Kiba asked. It was Asuma that answered. From the outside, Gata's business is completely legitimate, and he undoubtedly covers his tracks well. He also has an enormous amount of clout with many feudal lords due to his money. Without the proper amount of proof, no hidden village would move directly against him for fear of repercussions from the daimyo. Wave's situation, while sad, isn't sad enough for any village to get involved. It's too minor to a kage in the grand scheme of things. Tazuna just nodded sadly. We tried to get help from Kirigakure some years ago, but Gata's company has enormous stake in the Mist's economy due to the environment and shipping. We were turned away pretty forcefully. I bet Gata wasn't too happy about what you did, Naruto stated. The bridge builder just shook his head without a word. The silence spoke volumes. The quiet endured for the rest of the ferry ride, and the foursome plus dog disembarked on the shores of Wave Country. Tazuna-san, this is as far as I go. Goodbye and good luck to you, the ferryman said with a soft salute. Tazuna smiled at the man. Heh, super thanks. He took the second spot in the group behind Asuma. Let's get me home, it's not far from here. The dense foliage surrounding the inland area of Wave Country provided good cover, Naruto surmised. It makes a good spot for an ambush, especially given the natural mist cover. His bad feeling had never truly abated, and it was only getting worse now that the team was in fully unknown territory. The mist certainly didn't help. Kami, I'm pathetic. He cursed himself as he kept moving along. He was twitching at just about everything. He had almost killed a fucking rabbit when he heard a rustling in the bushes. A prickling sensation in the back of his neck had him on the ground nearly a full second before Asuma shouted, "Get down!" The Jonin wasn't a moment too soon as a whizzing blade tore through the air where Team 10's heads were previously. The blade lodged itself deep into the trunk of a tree about 3 meters ahead of Asuma and Tazuna. 3 green genin and their Jonin? Humph, I wonder why the demon brothers had any trouble at all with you guys, a man's voice spoke. Naruto's eyes were drawn to the massive cleaver's handle, where a man was perched casually. The man was tall, though shorter than Asuma's large form. He was bare from the waist up, and wore gray camouflage pants that fell to his heels. The sideways headband and bandages covering his mouth gave him a decidedly sinister appearance. Dark eyes regarded Asuma. They widened briefly as they took in his whole form. Well, that's unexpected. I thought you were just some Konoha scrub, but that sash on your waist says differently, Sarutobi Asuma. You've got quite the bounty on your head. Asuma's trench knives were in his hands as he regarded the newcomer with trepidation. I'm sure that 35 million Ryo would do wonders for your plans, wouldn't it, Momochi Zabuza? The man, revealed as Zabuza, chuckled. You know me. I'm honored that my legend has made its way to your village of tree huggers. Asuma stomped out his cigarette with a chuckle of his own. Massacred a full graduating class of Kiri Genin, a failed coup d'etat against the Mizukage, and you're planning to have another go at it. You're widely regarded as one of the stupidest men on the continent. What's not to know, he finished with a smirk. Zabuza growled at the insult. I see you've done your homework. If you have, then you'll know that I'm best there is at what I do. He jumped from his blade to the small lake. He landed with his cleaver on his back and 2 half-ram seals formed. And what I do isn't very nice. Ninpu, Kirigakure no Jutsu. Shit, Naruto thought as the mist got thicker, obscuring his view of Zabuza. Surround and protect Tazuna. Asuma barked. This guy's on a whole other level from the last ones. This is my fight. Naruto, hold my pack. Naruto came to his senses as he caught the throne supply backpack. Manji formation, he bit out. The 3 genin formed a protective triangle around Tazuna. It wasn't a moment too soon as hostile killing intent filled the air. Naruto almost choked as the feeling hit him. Such powerful killing intent. Is this what a Jonin battle is like? We're totally outclassed here, he realized with growing dread. His thoughts derailed when Asuma's wind chakra blew away some of the encroaching mist. Calm down, team, I'm not about to let you guys die here. The words, while meant for comfort, did little to assuage Naruto's fears. He hastily reminded himself of the discussion he had with Asuma earlier. There was nothing he could do now but fight. He palmed 2 kunai. 8 spots: liver, lungs, spine, subclavicle vein, jugular vein, heart, kidneys, and the brain. Which to choose? Zabuza's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Naruto couldn't get a read on his location. Kiba, he hissed. Can you smell him? The dog ninja shook his head. No, the mist's interfering. Shit. Ino, give us genjutsu cover. Naruto ordered. Too late. Zabuza crowed from in between Higenin. Naruto hadn't even sensed him move. Wind chakra swirled around Naruto's blades, but he had no chance to move before Asuma's trench knives were embedded blade first into Zabuza's gut. Naruto's eyes widened in jubilation before the body dissolved to water. Mizu Bunshin, he thought as he rapidly retreated away from ground zero. Sensei behind you, he called, but it was too late. Zabuza's cleaver tore through Asuma's body like a hot knife through butter, and the body disappeared in a plume of smoke. Wadash! Naruto watched as the body of Zabuza dissolved to water once more as Ino's kunai penetrated its back, her face a mask of terror, yet determined. A clang of weapons striking snapped his head around to a different spot in the small clearing. Asuma was locked in a hold with Zabuza. His trench knives were being pushed to the limit as he was forced to stop an overhead blow from the massive blade. Naruto hurried to his teammates. Ino, cover us. The girl quickly sped through hand seals and Naruto felt his senses scramble as a cloaking genjutsu covered the foursome. Across the clearing, Asuma and Zabuza were engaged in a grapple. Asuma's trench knives didn't have the same weight of Zabuza's cleaver, but they were far more maneuverable. Asuma showcased as much when he used the Nuke-Nin's momentum against him and hopped around the falling Zanbatsu. The Konoha Jonin struck out with his trench knives, but Zabuza's dexterity saved his head. The near miss went in Asuma's favor, however, when the extended wind chakra made a thin slice into the man's face. Asuma grimaced as he saw his strike failed to blind his opponent. The former Kiri Jonin brought his blade to bear in a desperate strike, but Asuma calmly intercepted the heavy blow with both hands. A small smirk played across the Jonin's face as he gained the upper hand. Naruto experienced a swooping sensation in his gut, he would later associate it with escaping death by a hair's breadth, and realized just how far outclassed he was in this fight. It was both startling and disheartening to realize just how far he was from his goal. He would have less than no chance in a fight like this, and neither of the combatants were S-ranked, of that, Naruto was sure. He knew that from his research. The blonde gritted his teeth as he watched the battle unfold with growing despair for both his sensei and himself. Zabuza moved to create space, but Asuma was having none of that. Naruto's eyes widened as his sensei closed the gap in less than a moment. Asuma was fast, and swept the feet of the shorter Zabuza. The bandaged man used his cleaver as leverage to keep his balance intact, and struck out with a high kick to Asuma's face. The chain smoker caught the blow, but winced in pain as a hidden blade stabbed his hand. He dropped back to survey his wound and grimaced as the blood sizzled and turned purple. Poison. Zabuza used his opponent's distraction against him, and charged swiftly, his blade poised to remove Asuma's head. The Jonin ducked the swipe and struck out with his wind-enhanced knives. His frustration increased when the Nuke-Nin danced out of the way. The man was surprisingly agile. The swordsman leapt back and unleashed a brace of 3 shuriken at his opponent. Asuma smirked as his trench knives found themselves spinning in the air. He sped through seals as fast as he could. Futon, Shinku Taijoku. He inhaled and then expelled a great sphere of wind toward the former mist swordsman. Zabuza cursed his mistake as his thrown weapons provided no shield against the sphere of wind. He dove to the side unceremoniously to avoid a direct hit, and only his reflexes saved his head. The wind whispered past Zabuza's ear as he jerked to the side, and he used his momentum to swing his Zanbatsu toward the Konoha Jonin. Asuma grimaced as he barely avoided the flat end of the massive blade. The poison must have been affecting his reflexes. He leapt back and stabbed his hand brutally, forcing the poison out of his system as he bled out. He knew that it had done its job, however. Asuma palmed two kunai with explosive tags and hurled them at Zabuza. The concussive force kicked the dirt and dust into the air. He prepared to charge into the fray once more when his opponent used the cover to reinforce his earlier Kirigakure no jutsu. Asuma cursed as he found himself back at square one. He started as the massive blade of his assailant hurled toward him. He dove to the side to avoid being eviscerated, and rolled fast and hard to avoid a second Zabuza who had appeared out of the mist. Water clone. Asuma ducked one swipe of the massive blade and quickly found himself face to face with a second. He stepped back and fainted left before gutting one clone in a spray of water and wind. Water clones were both weak and unintelligent, having less than 10% of the maker's chakra and ability. The second one soon fell to a sweeping combo with his knives. The Jonin glanced about hurriedly, and he used his wind chakra to clear the air around him of mist. His eyes widened as he saw Zabuza atop the small lake, sealing slowly and deliberately. He was powerless to stop the inclement Suetun, Suryuden that tore through the air toward him. A hasty Kawarimi saved his skin and reduced a log to splinters, and he shot another Shinku Taijoku at the mist swordsman. The assassin blocked with a creative use of the Suetun, Sura no Jutsu that wrapped around him and shielded him from the worst of the blast. Asuma grimaced. The man wasn't coming off of the lake anytime soon, and Asuma wasn't going any closer to it than he had to. Zabuza knew that Asuma held the advantage in close combat. The massive sword the man wielded was too cumbersome to be an advantage against Asuma's maneuverable, wind-enhanced trench knives. The Nuke-Nin was determined to keep it long range. The readily available source of water only made things easier. Changing tactics, he sped through seals and expelled a Katan, Karyo-Enden. He grimaced at both the chakra cost and the easy dodge Zabuza executed. He needed to end this fast. His reflexes were dulled from the poison, and his chakra was quickly exhausting itself. A plan was barely forming in his mind when he noticed Zabuza finish a seal sequence. Suetun, Debokufu no Jutsu, was the man's triumphant cry. Asuma's eyes widened as he took to the air to avoid the crushing and swirling waves, his futon nature propelling him higher than any other chakra-enhanced leap. The high-level water technique burst forth from the lake and tore through the landscape, uprooting trees and topsoil. Asuma landed on a branch next to his now exposed students, along with their client, once the water settled and began to run off. Naruto was watching the battle blankly and Ino had her hands held in a rat seal, a look of intense concentration on her face. Tazuna looked terrified. "Why aren't you under a cloaking genjutsu?" Asuma asked harshly. Kiba shook his head and avoided the question. "Sensei, get ready to move." Asuma raised two shocked eyebrows. Students didn't order their sensei. "What are you dash?" Now, both Kiba and Ino shouted at him. He turned his eyes back to Zabuza, only to see the man flying off the water. Naruto was in his place, his right foot still extended from his kick. The boy dropped under the surface of the lake to avoid 6 hastily thrown shuriken from the enraged man. Completely off balance, and he still almost kills me. Is this the power of a Jonin? Naruto wondered. Zabuza righted himself fast and prepared to unleash all hell on the smirking blonde brat, but he was forced to abort as Asuma came charging in like a divine wraith. The momentary opening was all that the Jonin had needed to retake the initiative. A small smirk played across Asuma's features as he realized his student's gambit had just won him the fight, though he was at a loss as to how his blonde student had snuck up on Zabuza. The size of Zabuza's sword was all that saved him from being cloven in two, as it provided much-needed leverage to escape the revitalized Jonin. The Nuke-Nin snarled as he saw that the extended futon chakra had made a scratch on the surface. Zabuza backpedaled quickly to avoid the follow-up slash. Asuma kawarimi'd with a nearby branch to appear behind Zabuza, and the bandaged man cursed as his avenue to the water was cut off. "God damn that brat!" His raging thoughts were interrupted by a kick to his chest that sent him flying. He stuck his zanbatsu to the ground to halt his flight, and winced as his arm was nearly pulled out of its socket. The Konoha Jonin hit hard. Asuma pressed his advantage hard as he unleashed another futon, Shinko Taigokyu. The Jonin snarled in triumph as it hit its mark. Zabuza was airborne for a few silent seconds before his flight was unceremoniously brought to an end. The former mist swordsman slumped to the ground as his back cracked the bark on a tree. Asuma's chakra swirled and howled as it extended itself into 2 3-foot blades. He made a swift march to deliver the coup de grace, but halted, senses screaming, as 2 senbon impacted and pierced Zabuza's neck. A young hunter nin in a kimono dropped to Zabuza's side and checked for a pulse. He turned to regard the Jonin and his charges, who had appeared next to him along with their shaken client. "He's dead," the masked hunter said in a young voice. "I apologize for stealing your kill, but I've been tracking him for some time now with few chances. I thank you for the opportunity to finish my job." "Hold up," Asuma said forcefully as he approached the scene. "I want to confirm it myself." The hunter acquiesced. The Jonin bent down to check the pulse, and nodded sharply when he could feel none. He stepped back. "He's all yours," he said with no small amount of suspicion and trepidation. He wasn't about to trust a foreign hunter in hostile territory. "Many thanks, once more," the masked hunter said as he disappeared in a swirl of mist. Asuma dropped to one knee once the hunter had disappeared, his show of strength no longer needed. He quickly palmed and ingested a soldier pill. The fight had taken a lot out of him. A hand on his shoulder caused an almost imperceptible start. His eyes locked with Naruto's and he knew that the boy had caught his slip-up. "Sensei, are you all right?" he asked, concerned. His face was set in the grim mask that Asuma had come to expect from the blonde ever since the news that their mission was more than it seemed came down. He found that he didn't like it. It didn't suit his student at all. It was like the boy had a switch he could flip in his brain in order to put on his serious face. "Yeah, Naruto, I'm fine. Just a little tired." He waved off the boy's concerns. "He was tougher than I thought." "And the poison?" Naruto asked wryly. Asuma was starting to both love and hate his student's perceptiveness. On the one hand, it was a very good trait to have as a shinobi. On the other, it was downright annoying sometimes. "Good eyes. It's not a problem, though. Right now, we need to focus on getting Tazuna back to his house." "Thank you, Sensei," Tazuna said with a bow. "I and my family are in your debt." He was no doubt shaken from the high-level ninja battle he had just witnessed. He was probably thinking that it might have been a good idea to bite the bullet and hope that the Hokage was nice enough to send a Jonin squad with him. There was no telling what might be coming next for Team 10. About time he realized that he owes us big for this, Naruto thought uncharitably as he helped Asuma to his feet. Being vindicated about the whole mission did little to soothe the blonde's nerves. They were still in somewhat hostile territory, they still had Gata to contend with, and they had no real idea of when backup would arrive, if ever. Less than a half hour later, the group came upon a ramshackle house on the water. Naruto grimaced as he saw the house's position. They'd be lucky if they didn't encounter another water user here. A sharp knock on the door brought a cautious and attractive woman to the door. Her fear evaporated when she saw her father and the Konoha ninja. "Father," the attractive woman cried. "I'm so glad you're safe." Tazuna comforted the woman with a broad smile that Naruto hadn't thought the man capable of. Now, there was nothing to worry about. Besides, these super ninjas kept me safe. At the mention of his escort, the woman quickly ushered the Konoha group inside. "Guys, allow me to introduce my daughter, Tsunami." "Thank you very much for protecting my father," the woman gushed. "You have my eternal gratitude." "It was no problem," Asuma reassured her. His genin barely withheld their snorts of derision. As Ino ushered Asuma upstairs to rest, Naruto elbowed Kiba in the ribs. The dog ninja had been staring rather openly at their client's daughter. "What?" Kiba questioned. I can't enjoy a nice view? I need something easy on the eyes after the time we've had. Naruto just shook his head at the boy's intransigence. You're such a dog, Kiba. He shouldn't have expected the insult to hold water. Not just any dog, Naruto, the boy shot back. The leader of the pack. Akamaru barked in agreement. Naruto sighed. Some things never changed. Asuma sighed as he looked out the window of Tazuna's guest bedroom. It was raining in Wave Country. The Jonin felt that it reflected his mood well. He mentally went over the end of his fight with Zabuza for what must have been the 100th time that day. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was dreadfully wrong. His suspicions were based on instinct, and they weren't pleasant to think about. He had relied on his instinct for many things before, and it had only let him down once. Even then, his decision had had its obvious upsides, and he had made a few lifelong friends in the Guardians. He probably would have learned more had he stayed at home, however. He didn't regret his decision, he wouldn't second-guess himself so long after the fact, but he realized that he had had more options than he had previously thought. He did regret the relationship he now shared with his father. He wouldn't deny being more than a little jealous of the amicable relationship his best student seemed to keep with the Hokage. While not as close as they once were, the two maintained a solid rapport. Thoughts of Naruto drew his gaze out the window once more, and he spied the blonde boy running through the seals for the futon, Rankuden on top of the nearby water. A thoroughly drenched Ino sat at the water's edge practicing her genjutsu seals. She would occasionally cast one on Naruto just to keep him alert and sharp. The thought of his two blonde students brought a small smile to Asuma's face. It had been easy to see that Naruto had had a soft spot for his fellow blonde from day one. The boy wore his heart on his sleeve, though he was getting better at hiding it. Ino, though, had been another story. It had taken some serious work on Asuma's part to debase her of the obsession she had had with Uchiha Sasuke. He had practically had to beat it out of the girl. It had taken time, but he had managed to instill the knowledge that training for training's sake was just as worthy a pursuit as chasing after the myopic Uchiha. It didn't hurt that Asuma had a rather low opinion of the boy. The young Uchiha was perfectly willing to squander the attention and adoration of many in order to better focus on his long-term goal of revenge. Myopic and antisocial, Sasuke had wasted many opportunities for camaraderie with his peers, something that would have undoubtedly helped him down the road. Hell, the only person he actively spent time with was Naruto. A few well-timed spying sessions on the Sharingan user had finally shown Ino the boy's true character, rather than the one she, and so many others thought he had. Girls would be girls, though, and Ino had started seeking the affection of what she determined to be the next best thing. Asuma firmly approved of the girl's choice. Naruto was, rather predictably, clueless about the whole thing. He was sure that the boy had his suspicions, but he was far from an expert on male-female relations. The Jonin's thoughts drifted back to the mission once more, and he lit a cigarette. The fact that he had smoked so little in the past day or so merely confirmed the bad feeling that he had. Running the scenario through his mind once more, he came to the same conclusion he had the past 50 or so times he thought about the whole ordeal. It wasn't nice, it wasn't pretty, but it was the most likely outcome. His soldiers would need to prepare for the worst. A quick look outside confirmed that Kiba was back from guarding their client. The boy was harassing Naruto on the water's surface and the blonde had retaliated by pushing the Inuzuka into the water, resulting in a full-blown water fight between his three genin. Asuma chuckled at his team's antics. They were good kids. They would be better shinobi by the time he was through with them. The team was assembled in the main bedroom that was being shared by the three males on the team a minute after he called them. Ino made a point to gloat about having her own room at least once every 2 hours, much to the boy's growing resentment. "Will you shut it, you blonde bimbo?" Kiba growled at the girl. "The only reason that you have your own room is because nobody here wants to have to deal with you more than necessary." "Say that again, dog breath." "I dare you," Ino snarled. Asuma shook his head at the blatant immaturity he was bearing witness to. Naruto wasn't helping matters by playing whatever side he happened to find more amusing at the time. "Shut up," the smoker bellowed around his cigarette. All chatter immediately came to a halt. Asuma never yelled. Sensei? Naruto ventured. The blonde was distinctly unsure about the whole situation. If I have all of your attention, the jonin began with a pointed glare at his two rowdier students. I have some details that need to be gone over. What is it now? Ino grumbled. This mission was rapidly shaping up in ways that she both hadn't expected and hadn't wanted any part of. Are we not getting paid? Not if we're all dead, Asuma thought morbidly. No, Ino, we're still getting paid. The Konoha Reserve Bank will reimburse us until such a time when Wave can pay off its debt. This is far more serious than money. He immediately had his genin's attention. Is this about Zabuza? Kiba was the one to raise the question, surprisingly enough. The boy had his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Asuma nodded grimly. It is. I believe that Zabuza is alive. Whatever reactions he had expected, they weren't the ones he got. He had expected surprise and denial. Instead, he got grim resignation. Ino and Naruto sent their teammate a nod. Kiba took the lead. I smelled something off about that hunter Nin when he left the clearing. I couldn't pinpoint it, but it definitely didn't smell like it was supposed to. There was no blood in the scent, something that should be common for hunters. Asuma was impressed, and took a moment to remind himself that the Inuzuka family heavily populated Konoha's own hunter Nin units. A scent can be masked though, right? He asked, more out of genuine curiosity than anything. Kiba shook his head. Not from an Inuzuka's nose. A scent remains for up to 2 months before the body's natural odor displaces it. While it is possible that the hunter hadn't had any other missions in that time, it's unlikely. On top of that, I also smelled a few different emotions rolling off the guy. The boy shook his head. I couldn't really tell, but they weren't emotions a hunter Nin would be feeling right after a kill. Asuma nodded along with the boy's deductions. I take it you informed your teammates and they helped you come up with your idea? The three nodded. Asuma was pleased with the minor sleuthing job his team had done. It showed a growth in their analytical skills. That's a good deduction. Obviously, I had the same thoughts, though on a slightly different track. Asuma leaned back. Anyway, Zabuza is alive, most likely, and he will be back. I'm nearly certain of that, the jonin postulated. What does that mean for us? Naruto questioned. The boy had tensed significantly when his sensei had backed up Kiba's deduction. The mission had just re-entered his comfort zone and now this happened. Training, was the simple answer. When he returns, he'll probably have an accomplice, and I doubt I'll be able to handle them both on my own. Our last fight showed that he was capable of going toe-to-toe with me, and I'm not going to be getting any stronger in such a short time. The man regarded his students with an appraising eye. The three shifted uncomfortably in the silence. You three, on the other hand, can do just that. Naruto dropped back with a heavy breath, his arms close to his chest. He inhaled deeply, and then blew it out steadily. The wind swirled around his kunai again in the blink of an eye. A flex of his leg muscles and a burst of chakra turned into a shunshin that carried him past his assailant with a clang of metal on metal. To attack or defend? He thought. His body was carrying him toward his opponent before he knew he had made up his mind. Asuma calmly, casually parried the strike of the kunai with his trench knives. The whirling sound of the combined futon chakra rubbing together became an almost deafening whine. A shift in his footwork put Naruto in striking position, and he punched out with his right kunai held in a reverse grip, deliberately keeping the blade close to his body. It was blocked as easily as the last. Naruto leaned back to avoid the retaliatory slash, and brought himself around for a low cross slash with his right blade. The strike was off balance, as Naruto wasn't used to using his right hand to strike across the body. It was important, however, as showing your back to an opponent was tantamount to suicide. The boy struck out with his leg at knee-high, and was rewarded with a thud as it connected. His attack was aborted as a blade whistled through the space where his head had been a moment earlier. Naruto redirected a blow at his chest with the outside of his wrist, and ducked under a second slash at head level. He switched from a reverse grip to a standard in both hands and slashed high at Asuma's head. The Jonin avoided the blow with ease, but Naruto continued his motion and spun his body around. His left blade missed the Jonin by 2 feet. On a sudden impulse, the boy released the wind chakra from around his knife and watched in satisfaction as it continued on toward his sensei at high speed. Asuma's eyes widened as the sharpened chakra tore toward him, and only a rapid shunshin saved his skin. The smoker watched in fascination as the futon chakra tore into the ground where he had just stood. The earth was torn and ripped to shreds with the grass and dirt still falling to the ground. A hole the general shape of a kunai's blade was left. Naruto stared at the mark in the ground in fascination. That technique might be useful in the future. Instinct forced the boy to duck the slash at his head, and he grimaced as he felt a few of his hairs be sliced off. Naruto retreated swiftly from the Jonin with quick steps. Asuma was having none of that, though, and he blurred into motion toward his student. Naruto ducked another slash at his head, but was forced to cross his arms in a block over his chest. He received a hard thrust kick for his efforts, and was sent flying into a nearby tree. His back hit the trunk hard, and he was sent crashing to the ground in a heap. That should teach you to never take your eyes from the objective in a fight, Asuma told the boy as he reholstered his knives. The Jonin retrieved a cigarette from his supply pouch, and lit it up with a snap of his fingers. I think I got the point, Naruto groaned. He sat up with a little difficulty, wincing at the bruise rapidly forming on his left arm where Asuma had kicked him. You kick pretty hard. The Jonin shrugged his shoulders as he leaned against a tree across from his student. You always bitch about me pulling punches in our spars, I just did what you asked. Naruto scoffed. It was what he had asked for. It was the only way he would learn, in the end. Maybe I didn't know what I was getting into. I reckon you didn't, Asuma laughed. There's a reason I'm a Jonin. Naruto sighed at that, his shoulders sagging. This mission was rapidly showing him his limits. First the fight with Zabuza, and now his spars with Asuma, they all reinforced the knowledge that he was far from his goal. Much too far. Stop that, the Jonin ordered the boy. You're moping, he continued when the boy looked confused. It's hard not to, knowing that your goal is so far out of reach, Naruto grumbled. Asuma sighed. He preferred the happy Naruto from his team back in the village. Out here in hostile territory, the boy wasn't the same. S rank is achieved by a select few, Naruto, it's not easy to do. The Jonin sat down with a sigh. I have an A-ranked bounty on my head dash. 35 million, Naruto interrupted. His sensei smiled slightly. He was proud of the amount of money on his head. That's right. Even so, that places me quite a bit below any ninja who's considered S-ranked, and I like to think that I'm pretty tough in my own right. Naruto couldn't help but agree. The fight between his Asuma and Zabuza represented a level of shinobi combat that he had no hope of surviving now. Asuma had been much stronger than he had thought, even given his sleuthing. It also put a seed of extreme doubt in his mind. If two A-ranked shinobi were so impressive, what would an S-ranked one be like? The thing about S-ranked ninja, Naruto, Asuma continued, is that there is always something that sets them apart. Take my father, for example. He's known throughout the continent as the shinobi no kami because of his mastery over all the ninja arts, bar none. That sets him apart from even the elite Jonin. And you? Naruto asked. Why aren't you like that? Surely you could do the same if you put your mind to it. Asuma shook his head with a rueful chuckle. If only. There are some of us that just don't have the ability. At my level, I'd have to delve into more obscure arts in order to get much stronger than I am now. That's something I'm not really willing to do. But why not? Naruto asked. The thought of willfully not getting stronger just didn't compute with the boy. I'm nearly 30, Naruto, and I've been in the business since I was 10. If I have my way, I'll retire in a few years. There's no reason for me to attempt to train in some obscure art just so I can retire without ever having to use it, Asuma explained. It's not worth the time, especially as I highly doubt that I'll be coming into contact with any S-rank ninja anytime soon. Naruto didn't understand, but he let it slide. The gist of it was that Asuma didn't want to devote hours of time to training himself, given his age. It made sense, sort of, but the idea of it couldn't rest in Naruto's brain. Maybe they were just wired differently. I think I get it, sensei, but it seems weird to me. Asuma just nodded. He didn't think that the boy would be able to really understand his need to settle down. It was a mature idea, and Naruto was too focused on his shinobi career to ever think about giving it up. The truth was that Asuma was tired. His original reason for joining the shinobi corps was to step outside the shadow of his father. Once it had been made abundantly clear that that was never going to happen, his motivation slipped, and he had to find new sources of drive. He had found one in the 12 Guardians, but that was so far in his past now that he had trouble remembering his mindset from back then. Naruto sighed heavily. I just feel like it's so far away, the boy muttered, more to himself than to Asuma. The Jonin kept his surprise in check, like he had done for the rest of the mission. He had never thought for a moment that his best student was so insecure about his own abilities. The boy had hidden depths that kept coming to the fore. You'd do well to stop dwelling on it, Asuma began. There's not much you can change about your situation in regards to other ninja, so you can only focus on getting yourself better. Naruto gave him a smile devoid of humor. That's easy for you to say. You're a Jonin now, and you were a Chunin when you were my age. I'm just a genin. Will you shut up? The Jonin reprimanded the boy harshly. The rebuke surprised the moping boy. That's exactly what I'm talking about right there. Stop comparing yourself to everyone else. People mature at different rates. I may have been a Chunin when I was your age, but Hatake Kakashi was one when he was 6. That doesn't mean that he's any better than I am. Asuma held up a hand to stop the boy's incoming protest. Yes, he might be, but not because of how strong he was when he was your age. Some people are just naturally gifted. Others had help, me included. I had a private tutor during my academy years teaching me the ins and outs of the profession. Asuma locked eyes with Naruto. You didn't have any of that, if the records are to be believed. Yet here you are. Worrying about how strong someone else is in comparison to you gets you nowhere. It might motivate you for a while, but in the end it gets so depressing that all your drive eventually gets sapped if you chose someone who's much stronger than you. It distracts you from what's important, and that's your own ability. You sound like you speak from experience, Naruto said in a smallish voice. Asuma smiled ruefully. I do. I made the same mistake you are now, but I chose my father to measure myself against. Needless to say, it soon became abundantly clear that I was never going to reach his level, at least not in the time frame that I set for myself. He was stronger than I am now when he was 15, that should tell you all you need to know about how good he is. But he was a freak of nature. Naruto exclaimed, not unkindly. It was meant in a flattering way. So was Hatake Kakashi, the Yondaime, Uchiha Itachi. Naruto tensed involuntarily at the last one. Asuma passed it off as his connection to Sasuke. So was I, to a certain extent. Your problem, Naruto, is that you say that you want to be S-ranked, and now you've been shown a level of fighting that you've never even dreamed of before. You're trying to measure yourself against me and Zabuza, and it's getting you nowhere. Your circumstances were different from theirs, and you still think that they'll serve as a decent measure for your skills. Asuma paused to let the boy try to wrap his head around the idea. Doing that makes you lose perspective. You lose focus. Naruto nodded hesitantly. He could see where Asuma was coming from. He had been comparing himself to Asuma and Zabuza, and Itachi, to a lesser extent, and he had come up with nothing good. He hadn't had any help in getting his skills thus far, save for what he learned from Asuma, and he was pretty good for his age. Maybe there was some truth to the Jonin's words. If there's anything that my experience has taught me, Naruto, it's that the only way to get stronger is to focus on yourself, and what you need to get where you want to go. The Jonin paused to formulate his statement. It's about finding and breaking your upper limit. Naruto leaned back heavily as he digested the words. Was that what made Asuma and Zabuza so strong? Was that what had made Itachi so strong that he had been able to massacre his clan single-handedly? If so, he had a new goal. He knew that there were certain unchangeable things in the world, his childhood had taught him that much, and this mission had only reinforced that notion. His status now wasn't one of them. He could get stronger, he would get stronger. Asuma didn't matter. Zabuza didn't matter. Sasuke didn't matter. All that mattered was how strong he was, irrespective of all else. He would find his upper limit. Then he would break it. To measure one's own capacity, Asuma concluded, sounding rather pleased with his phrasing and intruding on Naruto's thoughts. The blonde nodded, a new fire lit within him. To measure my capacity. That's all that mattered. Mist was apparently a staple of wave country. So much so that after 3 days, Naruto thought that Kirigakure ought to be relocated. Between the rain, cold, and almost perpetual misty atmosphere, the Kiri ninjas would feel right at home. The blonde pulled his cloak about him tighter to combat the early morning chill. Fire Country was aptly named, and it wasn't for its trees. Naruto was unused to chilly temperatures during all but the winter months. Even then, that was only in the morning before it warmed considerably. It didn't help him now that he wore short-sleeved clothing and shorts. He was lucky that he brought his cloak with him on a whim. He wasn't sure how the workers could stand working in such conditions, but they all seemed perfectly adjusted to the climate. Many of them were even wearing shorts. Naruto frowned from his elevated position in one of the nearby trees in Wave Country. Tazuna was up and alert, directing his workers in a way that Naruto wouldn't have thought capable of the drunk had he not seen it with his own eyes. The blonde's conceptions of his client were rapidly being destroyed. He was still an ass, though, and it seemed to have rubbed off on his grandson. Why do you try so hard? The boy had tears in his eyes. Naruto raised a curious head to face the 8-year-old. This was first the boy had spoken to the group since they had arrived days previous. Excuse me? That was Ino, collapsed in the corner after a day's training. You heard me. Why do you try so damn hard when all you're gonna do is die? Tears were freely streaming down the boy's face. It doesn't matter how much you train, none of you are a match for Gata's men. Blue Eyes found the orbs of his team members, and Naruto raised a silent eyebrow. 3 head shakes met him. They didn't know what was up either. No matter what claims you make or how hard you work, you're still gonna die. The weak always get killed by the strong, the boy yelled. Team 10 was stunned. The boy hadn't said so much as a word for nearly a week, and suddenly he was bursting out in tears. It wasn't expected. Asuma glanced at Tazuna and Tsunami to see them looking downward, not even making an attempt to stop the boy's tirade. Naruto leaned back in his chair, idly draping an arm around the back. Who are you to call us weak? We've protected your grandfather so far, haven't we? He raised an eyebrow at the boy. That sent the boy over the edge. He slammed his hands on the table. You don't know a thing about us, yet you're being nosy. You're always acting up and being cheerful, but you don't know a thing about having a hard life. The boy snorted and sent a glare at the now fuming Naruto. I'd hate to be like you. Who are you to call us nosy, huh, shrimp? Kiba crowed from his rest on the floor. Your grandpa is the one who brought us into this, and we're helping him when we don't have to. Show some damn respect. You're all so stupid, the boy whispered aghast and as if their deaths were a foregone conclusion. Gato is too strong for you guys. You're just gonna die like the rest of them. Naruto shook his head in disbelief. You know, kid, your grandpa's a pretty strong guy. He's standing up to Gato. Is he going to die too? His voice was deceptively calm. Inari had no answer. You've got some fucking nerve coming up in here, acting like this is all some tragedy for you to star in. Your grandpa's a lying, cheating, drunk piece of crap who dragged us into this mess, but he's doing something good for your country. I thought you'd have some respect for that. Naruto's disgust dripped through his every word like venom, but I guess I was wrong. You say you'd hate to be like us, but I'd hate to be like you. You sit here and cry all day, acting like you have some right to wallow in misery while your grandfather risks his life to help you. You disrespect him, and you disrespect us, the people who are trying to keep him alive. Naruto rose in a swift motion, towering above the terrified boy. You're nothing but a weak little crybaby. Grow up. He spit at the boy's feet before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto really couldn't care less about the boy's respect, but he wasn't about to let the boy talk down to him about not having a hard life. His life was full of sensitive information, however, and he couldn't exactly tell the boy about the Kyuubi, so he had settled for the next best thing. Tsunami had pulled him aside later on to apologize for her son's behavior. She had fed him some sob story about a guy named Kaiza, who Inari had thought of as a father. It had only increased Naruto's disgust with the boy. He was not only dishonoring his grandfather, but his adopted father as well. Naruto supposed that he may have been a bit unreasonable with respect to the boy. He was only 8 and had been the subject of his very own tragic life, but he couldn't help it. Weakness was one of the few things that Naruto hated, mostly as a result of what lay ahead of him in the future, and Inari had it in spades. He had had countless opportunities to pussy out and give up when he had been younger, but he hadn't. Even in the face of overwhelming odds in the form of a high-level ninja group bent on his eventual death, he had refused to bow to fate and give up. More than anything, Naruto couldn't help but look at Inari and see a reflection of himself. It wasn't clear, and it wasn't accurate, but it was a picture of what he could have been if he had been less resilient. Weaker. It was disturbing how easily Naruto could see what he might have been when he looked at Inari, and he hated it. He hated it with every fiber of his being. Weakness wasn't something he abided. It would get him killed, and everything he had ever done for over 4 years had been to avoid that outcome. He blinked quickly to refocus. A new man had come to the bridge, and Naruto ready to kunai in case he was hostile. A quick wrist movement and he would be dead before he knew what happened. The man was nervous, that much Naruto could see from his position. He kept glancing to his left and right, checking for people near him, before looking over his left shoulder. Whoever he was, Naruto was sure that he was no assassin. Iwamoto-san. Tazuna called from his spot looking over plans. A bottle of sake lay half-drunk next to him. What can I do for you? Naruto lowered his kunai as the man was recognized. He wasn't sure what the man's intentions were, but he obviously knew Tazuna. It didn't stop him from remaining alert, however. The man named Iwamoto shuffled over to the bridge builder quickly. Tazuna-san, he stuttered. I'm not quite sure what to say, but he glanced over his left shoulder once more, and Naruto followed his eyes. A small shack stood off to the side of the bridge, with a clear view of where Tazuna and his friend were standing. Cerulean eyes narrowed as they attempted to pinpoint what the nervous man was looking for. A glint of sharpened steel was all the warning Naruto had. Archer. The blonde was in motion before he knew what he was doing. Concentration was sharpened to a pinpoint in a split second, and Naruto exploded into Shunshin. The man named Iwamoto went flying as Naruto barreled through him. One hand pushed Tazuna to the ground, while the other hand reached up and plucked an arrow out of the air easily. Naruto's eyes searched it for a moment, and he chucked to the water as he caught sight of the tag on it. Get down, he yelled as he roughly pulled Tazuna under his body. The arrow detonated in midair. Naruto felt the impact, but was hardly shaken. The tag had been low grade. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Iwamoto was repeating, his head tucked into his hands. The other workers had pulled him away from Tazuna hurriedly and had thrown him on the ground. He took my family. You have to understand, the man continued to sob. A crowd of workers had gathered around him threateningly. Naruto tore his gaze from the man and gestured for Tazuna to stay down. You all right? The drunk nodded shakily. Why yeah. I think so. Good. The rest of my team would have heard the explosion from nearby, and they'll be on their way. Stay down until they get here, I'm going after the shooter, Naruto explained quickly. This had been a one-shot deal, and he had little time to catch the would-be assassin before he disappeared if the man was any good. Tazuna nodded once, resolutely. Okay. Naruto glanced about, mentally doing a few hasty calculations to determine the likely escape route of the archer. Blue eyes rested on the rickety house that was adjacent to the bridge's entrance and about 150 yards away. The archer had been a good one to make the shot as accurate as he did. The tag would have taken care of the rest had he missed. Is that building abandoned? He asked Tazuna. The man followed his line of sight and nodded. Yeah, it was abandoned when Gata's men killed the family inside. No one wanted to live there. It was perfect. With close proximity to the bridge, the archer would have had a clear shot at Tazuna. All he had needed was to know which one he was among the workers. That's where Iwamoto had come in. Naruto sped through seals with the precise expertise of a master. He reared back and expelled a futon, Rankuden at the house, watching with satisfaction as the concentrated bullet of wind blew the wooden abode to pieces. A quick kawarimi later, Naruto was amidst the rubble, ignoring the shouts from the nearby city streets. Naruto turned his head about quickly, searching for a sign of the shooter. There was no sign of him, but Naruto picked up a discarded longbow that was left behind. This was no shinobi's work, at least not the work of a good one. There wouldn't be any evidence left behind. That fact alone reassured Naruto. He could wait for his team. The man wouldn't have gotten far. The cacophony of confusion was left behind as Naruto made his way back to the bridge. You're not surprised? Asuma shrugged. It makes sense. Gata's not stupid. Even if Zabuza is alive, he has to be pretty expensive to employ. Remember, Gata's a businessman, and taking a shot at Tazuna while he's more exposed makes sense from a monetary standpoint, especially if he doesn't need to use his more expensive help. Naruto nodded in acceptance of the point. The attack almost worked anyway. I didn't see the note until the last second. All the more reason to have both Kiba and Ino on the bridge at the same time. 2 sets of eyes are better than one, and Akamaru can help Kiba smell a hostile long before they get within sight. Naruto sent the man a questioning look. You think that Gat'll send another attack? Asuma shook his head in the negative. No, I agree that this was probably a one-shot deal, but there's no sense in not being prepared if he does. Kiba and Ino can complete their training there, in any event, and I'll be by to supervise for the most part. They're not done yet? Naruto asked with a small laugh evident in his voice. You'd do well to remember that they both had to learn the water walking exercise before attempting the Shunshin, Asuma chided his smug student. You had a leg up on them in that regard. The Jonin neglected to mention that Naruto probably had double the inherent ninjutsu talent of both his teammates, plus the chakra to burn while training longer. There was no use inflating the boy's head though. It wasn't like it wasn't big enough already in some regards. Honestly, the boy could be humble and calculating one moment, worried about his skill in regards to someone far out of his league, and be the most arrogant, hard-headed idiot the next. It was like he had a switch that he flipped at his leisure. It was damn annoying for the Jonin. Yeah, whatever you say, sensei, Naruto said. So, what are we gonna do about this? We? Asuma questioned. Yeah, we. Aren't we going to do something about this Gata guy? We are doing something, Naruto. We're guarding Tazuna, Asuma deadpanned. You know what I mean, Naruto grunted in frustration. His sensei could be so annoying at times. Asuma just chuckled. Calm down, Naruto, I know what you're talking about. The Jonin frowned. I wasn't planning on doing anything directly, but this attack means that Gata's not afraid to use people besides Zabuza, and we don't know who those people are. Naruto nodded vigorously. I agree, sensei. Do you think it would be a good idea to assault Gato directly? He's our major adversary here, and with him dead, the mission is as good as done. Asuma shook his head. It's not a bad thought, but we've no idea how many men Gato has on retainer. Some may even be shinobi, and the last thing we want is to charge headfirst into another trap. It was logical, and Naruto accepted the point, though he wasn't happy about it. Preemptive striking made sense given their situation. They were stuck in hostile territory with no backup in sight, and with the looming threat of an A-rank shinobi's imminent attack hanging over their heads. It wasn't a good situation to be in, and Naruto felt horribly out of depth. He had never been made so aware of his limits before and he didn't like it. That said, Asuma began, I wouldn't be against some reconnaissance. Me? Naruto asked, slightly bewildered at being given a side mission. Asuma shrugged. It would have to be. Neither Kiba nor Ino have the stealth skills to manage it, and they have their training to complete anyway. I can't be too far from Tazuna in case Zabuza makes another appearance. So I'm expendable? Naruto joked with a light laugh. You're available, Asuma countered. And I should hope that you wouldn't have much of a problem sneaking past civilians. Naruto leaned against the wall with a shrug. Civilians were easy pickings. He had been duping them for years now. What, exactly, would I be looking for? Information about Gata's company, logs, histories, what shinobi he's currently employing. Any information that might be sensitive. Asuma pulled out a cigarette and lit it with a snap of his lighter. Other than that, location. Once we deal with this mess with Zabuza, I want to go after Gato. I thought you didn't want to take him on directly? Asuma shook his head. You misunderstood me. I don't want to walk into a trap with no information, and no idea what we might be up against. That, and Zabuza's still dangerous. Other than that, though. Asuma frowned and narrowed his eyes. Gata's been allowed to work unchecked for too long. He needs to be eliminated if Wave is ever going to recover. Naruto raised an eyebrow and wrinkled his nose. Is it a good idea to get so heavily involved? Outside the mission, Gato's not our problem. He knew he was contradicting his earlier idea, but with preemptive assassination off the table, Gato really wasn't Team 10's problem. Asuma looked at him sharply, and Naruto reflexively leaned back from the man's hostile gaze. You'd do well to think about more than just the mission and yourself, Naruto. While we're here, helping these people should be a priority. They've been subjected to untold cruelty from one man, and we have the power to stop it. It's practically common courtesy. Naruto just nodded while he processed the information. You may be right, sensei, but I still feel uneasy about this whole thing. Naruto shook his head. We sent for backup back in Fire Country, and that was weeks ago. I don't feel comfortable here knowing that we might not have any help on the way, and that we don't actually have to be here. Asuma just sighed. The boy's point certainly had merit. Team 10 had no responsibility here other than the protection of Tazuna, and even that could be invalidated due to Tazuna's lying about the mission. It didn't make it the right thing, however. Sometimes, Naruto, it's down to the people in the world who have power to use it justly, even if it means exposing themselves to danger, Asuma lectured. In this case, the people with power are us. It may go against common shinobi thinking, but it is our responsibility to help those less fortunate than us, if given the opportunity. The Jonin locked eyes with the boy. It's a choice between what is right and what is easy. Naruto averted his eyes, Asuma's idealism making him uncomfortable. He certainly felt sympathy for the people of Wave, but he couldn't help but think that Gato simply wasn't his team's, and Konoha's, problem. Call him jaded, but Wave had just rolled over and died when Gato strolled in, to the best of his knowledge, and Naruto couldn't stand that. They had made their own bed by doing nothing, and Naruto was perfectly content to let them sleep in it. It was true that Gato had crippled their economy, but how hard was it for a country, albeit a small one, to rise up and kill one man? Hell, they could have appealed to the Sandaime. Konoha had no real stake in Gato's affairs, and he would have listened. The old man had enough pull with just about everyone important on the continent to get Gatta to leave Wave alone. No one fucked with Konoha when they got involved in international affairs. Naruto snorted when he realized that he was having a proud citizen of Konoha moment, and especially in civilian matters. As long as it didn't directly hurt another of the big five, and sometimes even when it did, no one really bothered with it. They might make a bit of a stink, but they got out of the way eventually. One emissary from the daimyo to the Hokage and Gatta would have been out of Wave or dead, with his empire divided for Konoha's use. But no, Wave had rolled over and died, letting one rich asshole completely dominate them. It's disgusting, Naruto thought. In his own way, he was a go-getter, a proactive person and a man of action. He had proved that through his training. Wave's attitude toward Gatta went against everything he stood for. Seeing a country of people so totally submit to one man's tyranny, especially when he wasn't a shinobi, was as disgusting to him as Inari's attitude toward his life. People like that might as well be dead, in the blonde's esteemed opinion, though he would never share that view with anyone, let alone his sensei. Such an attitude was frowned upon in Konoha, despite being a shinobi village, and he was sure that it wouldn't help his standing with anyone there. He honestly didn't know why he stuck around the village. The people hated him. He lived at the grace of the Sandaime, something that was sure to expire as soon as the old man, and he had been treated like shit until he had bothered to shut up and prove he had some skills. He was still treated like shit sometimes, though not as openly. It was his home though, and it was only one he had at present. What a sad state of affairs. Suggest that you keep your investigations until night, Asuma spoke. It never hurts to be careful, and I'd hate to lose my best student because he made a rookie mistake against a few samurai. Naruto shook his head with a small chuckle, trying to dispel the tension in the room. I thought you knew me better than that, sensei. The Jonin snorted. Oof. Maybe so, but things can from manageable to you being dead in an instant if someone like Zabuza detects you. You might be strong for a genin of your age, but Zabuza is way out of your league. If you come anywhere near him, get out immediately, he said, dead serious. Naruto nodded once, sharply, at the order. There was never any question that he would get the hell out of any situation where Zabuza was involved. He knew his limits, and they were far from Zabuza's, even while the man was injured. There was also that Hunter Nin to worry about. Of course, sensei, he reassured the man. He would follow orders, even if he didn't like his situation here. There wasn't all that much he could do about it at present, so he would just do his part to make sure his team got out of this debacle in one piece. I'll be in touch, he said on his way out the door. Asuma just gave him a small nod before turning to the window. He stared out over the water with a melancholic expression. He had a bad feeling. The rain made for a steady beat on Naruto's casa. It slid off in waves as the water steadily pounded to the ground. He would have to remember to thank Tazuna for the traditional bamboo hat. It served the same purpose as a hooded cloak, while looking far less conspicuous. The casa was commonly worn in these parts. He still thought he looked stupid. So did his team, if the combined jeering from Ino and Kiba he got on his way past them was any indication. He contented himself with the knowledge that it was a pragmatic choice of attire. At least it kept him dry. The hat was the last thing on the blonde's mind as he wove through the streets of Wave Country's westernmost city. Maintaining a low profile in the streets was more difficult than he had originally thought. He was used to the busy streets of Konoha, filled with people. The city streets he currently walked were nearly empty, the general populace in their rickety shops, hoping for the occasional customer. He had graced a few with his patronage, and had been rewarded by gracious smiles and some damn good yakitori. It had been almost as good as ramen. The few smiles didn't make up for the vast majority of depressed people, and they certainly didn't stop him from planting his foot in the face of the dumbass who had tried to pickpocket him. He reminded himself that he was disguised here, and the man hadn't just been so retarded as to try to pickpocket a known shinobi. He just got unlucky with his mark. It didn't help that the man was horrible at pickpocketing people. Naruto had more than a little experience in the fine art, and the man's technique had been horrendous. It had nearly offended the blonde's sensibilities. In any event, the incident hadn't helped with his cover. News spread fast in the city, and most of the populace seemed to be giving him a wide berth. That was fine, though. He wasn't trying to be overt in his intentions, but he was fine with a wide berth. It gave him more room to maneuver if it became necessary. Having scrounged for necessities for much of his young life in Konoha, Naruto knew the advantages of both being in a crown and out of one. He idly fingered the leather-bound book in his pocket as he turned onto a side street. Lined with bars and cheap prostitutes on the street corner, it was the unofficial red lights district of the city, and one of the parts that Gata had the most influence over. His thugs hung out here regularly. That was perfect for Naruto. He moved toward the most packed bar. It was only 5 in the evening, but the establishment was booming with noise. He stopped in front of the bouncer. "Can I help you, kid?" the man asked, his hand drifting to his katana in what should serve as a threatening gesture. His partner wandered over to back him up. Naruto wasn't impressed. "Yes, actually," he began pleasantly. His blue eyes bored into the man's as he stepped closer. "I was wondering if you could dash." He cut off as he stepped on the man's foot, hard. The bounder screamed as his toes were crushed, and Naruto's used his distraction to lay one in his gut. A single chop to the neck was likely overkill, but one could never be too careful. The second bouncer had his wits about him in a moment, and slashed out at Naruto with his katana. Naruto avoided the swipe casually, and used the outside of his right arm to push the blade away from him. 2 quick steps put him inside the man's guard, and a strong uppercut laid the second bouncer out. "Hey," was the call from the bar as people began to notice what was happening. Naruto ignored them in favor of looping 2 sets of arms over his shoulder and disappearing in a swirl of leaves. He left a wink for the customers who had moved toward him when he knocked out the guards. The group was stunned. He reappeared with his luggage on top of the highest building in the city. His target for the day was an archer. He wasn't about to give him a good shot if the man came looking for him. Naruto dropped the bouncers to the ground unceremoniously, and surveyed the city as the 2 men groaned in pain. The view really was quite nice from up here. The sea and the sunset made for a majestic sight. So, Naruto began after he was pretty sure the men had regained some semblance of coherency. "How long have you 2 been working here?" he asked pleasantly. He wasn't quite sure how to start something like this. It was his first interrogation, but giving the men some time to give up information willingly might be a good idea. It would also assuage his conscience later if he had to resort to some more extreme methods. The men just groaned some more. Naruto turned to regard his prisoners, and raised an eyebrow at the baleful look one man sent him. The other was looking at him in fear. "The sooner you cooperate, the sooner this is all over," Naruto said, his voice now flat. He wasn't screwing around here. He needed information from these guys, and he would get it. Being stationed at the entrance to one of the most popular bars frequented by Gata's men, these men learned a lot about the organization simply by standing around and listening. They could probably identify a large number of Gata's thugs and associates just from sight alone. That didn't even begin to cover what they likely overheard on a daily basis. "I'm not gonna tell you shit, kid," the first man grunted as he stood up. Naruto hadn't bothered to bind either of them. The bouncer reached behind him in what was supposed to be a subtle gesture, and Naruto smirked as the man's face went slack. "I'm a trained shinobi, sir. You're going to talk to me one way or the other." The blonde gave a feral grin as he brandished the formerly hidden knife he had lifted from the bouncer. "Your cooperation will just make it go faster." He could see the man thinking about it. Not having a weapon on him had taken the man out of his comfort zone. He had no idea what he was dealing with. For all the bouncer knew, Naruto could have been a trained interrogator. A quick flick of Naruto's fingers and the blade was buried handle-deep in the second bouncer's right shoulder. The screams were oddly satisfying as the man dropped to the floor. His partner's eyes kept flickering back and forth between Naruto and himself, unsure of what to do. "That's just a taste of what might happen if you don't spill." Naruto walked over to the kneeling man and unceremoniously yanked the knife back out. He was inwardly surprised that the blade had penetrated that deep. It wasn't very sharp. If you do, however, that won't need to happen again, he continued over the howls. He contained his sneer for the man's reaction by reminding himself that this man wasn't a trained shinobi. Hell, he wasn't a trained anything. Naruto casually moved back to the building's edge, surveying the sea with an appraising eye. It really was quite the sight for a person not accustomed to its majestic beauty. He'd have to make a trip back at some point. So, what can you tell me about Gata's men? Naruto asked, his pleasant demeanor making a comeback despite the howls of pain. The uninjured bouncer, relatively speaking, continued to look apprehensive, his eyes settling on his screaming partner in shock. Naruto sighed, he wasn't cut out for this sort of stuff. He'd do what was necessary, though. A deft flick of the fingers sent the knife sailing into the injured man's other arm, and the screams doubled in intensity. The second bouncer's attention snapped to Naruto, his eyes wide with fear. I'm not dicking around up here. Tell me what I want to know, and nothing's gonna happen to you, he delivered in his best menacing voice. If not dash, he gestured to the screaming man. I'll start on you. The man squealed like a pig, and Naruto did his best to contain his satisfaction amidst the slowly dying screams of pain. Kawasaki Gendo, Naruto began, pointing to a picture of a young man posted up on the wall. 19 years old, genin. Former AIM nin, and classified as a D-ranked nuke nin. No special abilities of note. He's an archer, though, Asuma clarified from his position against the wall. He absently puffed on a cigarette. Yes, and a crafty one if his trick with the explosive tag is any example. Team 10 had transformed the attic, small though it was, of Tazuna's house into a form of situation room. Naruto had his information that he retrieved from the two bouncers posted up on the walls. Various arrows and lines connected names to the few faces that they had access to. The two bouncers had been a veritable gold mine of information regarding Gata's network of enforcers. Everything from names, likely hangout spots, to where many of them lived and collected their pay was almost common knowledge to the two men. It was amazing what someone could learn in a bar. Among the most valuable of the information gleaned from the two bouncers were the identities of the few people who made the most on Gata's payroll. Aside from Zabuza, of course, who remained an elusive figure to the average thugs. Thanks to Asuma's super handy bingo book, they were able to match all four men to faces of missing nin. None were over C ranked, and the team had already dealt with two of them. The Demon Brothers. That left Kawasaki Gendo, the AIM archer who had taken a pot shot at Tazuna when Naruto had been on duty, and Funino Futaba, a C-ranked IWA nuke nin accused of the murder of his own comrades. That's great and all, but why exactly are we dealing with this? Kiba asked in a whine. He had just completed the Shunshin earlier in the day, and, instead of getting some quality time to play with Akamaru, he had to sit through some briefing that he had no idea about. On top of that, Naruto apparently had had some super secret mission that he hadn't known about. Now that just wasn't fair. Naruto sighed and made to explain the situation, one that Asuma had just barely glanced over, preferring to leave it to him, but was cut off by Ino. Baka, she snarled, cuffing Kiba on the head. Asuma-sensei and Naruto-kun are getting to that. Kami, keep your hands to yourself, you degenerate harpy. I was just asking a question. Ino glared viciously at Kiba for his comment, but refrained from further hitting after a meaningful glance from Asuma. Thanks, Ino, but that wasn't really necessary, Naruto started. Despite his amusement and exasperation with the situation, there was no need for Kiba to get hit over it. Anyway, Kawasaki here, along with Fun Ino, serve as two of Gatu's top enforcers. They're also the only other shinobi he has on his payroll, aside from Zabuza and that hunter nin guy. The idea, Asuma took over for the blonde, is to mount an operation to flush out and eliminate the two. We don't need them interfering in any future confrontation that we might have with Zabuza. While we're at it, why don't we go for the kill on Zabuza too? Ino asked, perplexed. If we're looking for some preemptive striking, why not hit the big guy? Asuma took a drag from his cigarette. As I've already explained to Naruto, Zabuza is far too dangerous at present to mount a full assault against without knowing exactly what we're getting into. He's already proved that he can pretty much go toe-to-toe with me, and he'll have backup this time. I couldn't get any info on his whereabouts anyway, Naruto grumbled. He wasn't pleased with not being able to get any information on the Kirigakure no Kijin. No one around here really knows about him. So, what, we just make up an attack plan for these two guys? Kiba asked. Yep, was Asuma's answer. And you won't be helping us? Ino questioned dubiously. Nope. So, Naruto began, instead of dealing with two Nukenin who would be child's play to you, you're having us do it. That about covers it. Why? That was Ino. Asuma took a seat in a nearby chair with a sigh. There's going to be a time when you three will be promoted to Chunin and will be taking your own missions. Given your skills and potential, I have reason to believe that that time is sooner, rather than later. That means that you three have to be prepared to deal with threats like these two men. When that happens, I won't be around to be there as a safety net in case something goes pear-shaped. You'll be leading your own missions with your own teams, and you'll be responsible for them. Asuma took one final drag before chucking the cigarette out the open window. Experience with the unknown isn't something many talented genin get to face, but it's necessary for their futures. Putting you three in a situation like this, with enemies who aren't particularly strong and with me as an indirect supervisor, simulates a situation that you'll likely be in for the rest of your lives. The three genin exchanged looks, each conveying their understanding of what their sensei was doing. It would help them down the road, but it didn't mean they had to enjoy putting their lives on the line. It's best to get it out of the way now, rather than wait for the mission to really mean something down the road, and you to be inexperienced, Asuma finished seriously. I think, we understand, Sensei, Kiba ventured. The difference between knowledge and wisdom is experience, Naruto quoted from an old ninja code. As knowledgeable and well-prepared as they were, Asuma was right in saying that they were inexperienced in terms of being actual ninja. That type of experience could be the difference in a fight or mission down the road. Without experience, they wouldn't be able to anticipate or react properly to threats that may reveal themselves, no matter how well trained they might be. Very good, Naruto, Asuma commended. That quote is something to keep in mind for the rest of your shinobi careers. Kiba got back into the thick of the planning. You said you would be an indirect supervisor, he asked. You'll have a Kage Bunshin of mine watching over you in case something goes south. If anything happens, it should be able to buy you the time needed to escape, if not outright kill the target. Otherwise, I need to be at the bridge with Tazuna-san. Kiba nodded and Akamaru yipped. Well, I'll leave the planning to you three, Asuma said as he made his way out of the room. Just be sure to run it by me before you guys start. Yes, Sensei, the three genin chorused. The door shut behind him with a click. You think he's just being lazy with having us do all the work for this one? Ino asked her male teammates. Naruto and Kiba exchanged smirks. Definitely. Lazy bastard. It was a good speech though. Yeah, Ino, Kiba waved her off. How are we gonna handle this one? I don't know about you guys, but me and Akamaru have been itching for some real action. Ino smirked in agreement while Naruto gave a soft smile and a laugh. I've had about enough action for one mission. Bah! Don't be such a pansy, Naruto. Ino argued. And what's this about some super secret recon mission that we weren't included in, she asked rather menacingly. Kiba growled in agreement. Naruto palmed his forehead. He knew that they were going to give him hell for that. It was just a little information gathering. Nothing serious. It was pretty boring actually. As if, Naruto. Kiba snarled. Tazuna said there were rumors of two of Gata's thugs getting stuck up on some roof in the city and having the crap beaten out of them. Anything to do with that? Naruto just shook his head and shrugged. Maybe. Can we just focus on the mission here? He asked desperately. Kiba humphed. but the severe expression on his face melted. Yeah, whatever. Just bring us along next time. Might I remind you that you were training? Naruto asked smarmily. I was under the impression you were still struggling with the Shunshin. Ino interrupted the squabble as Kiba made to retort. Hey idiots, we have a mission to plan. We can deal with Naruto's side projects later. She sent a vicious smirk at Naruto, who now looked a little apprehensive as well as incredulous at the change of attitude. He didn't want to be on Ino's bad side. He regained his composure quickly. Absolutely, Ino Taishu, he snapped a mocking salute that she couldn't help but laugh at. So, she began after her giggles died down. Let's get down to business. You said these two meet up sometimes? Naruto nodded and Ino's eyes gleamed. Is that so? She trailed off with a smirk. Naruto and Kiba couldn't help but grin back as Ino described her plan. The boy removed his casa as he stepped inside the high-end apartment complex. The city on the western edge of Wave Country had once been quite prosperous. The complex Naruto had just entered was a remnant of Wave's brighter days. The days before Gata put a vice grip on the country's economy. Crisp, air-conditioned air met Naruto's face, and the boy idly traced the places where his whisker marks usually stood out. It was lucky that Ino still carried a small makeup kit with her on missions. Girls will be girls, Naruto thought fondly as he passed the pretty receptionist and tossed her his best charming smile. He wouldn't need her help to find the rooms he was looking for, but making a good impression was never a bad idea. The blonde Yamanaka had left her academy misconceptions behind, for the most part, but she still wanted to be able to look pretty if the occasion called for it. Naruto thought that she looked plenty pretty enough even without makeup, though he would never admit it to his fellow blonde. It would only serve to increase the girl's already unbearable teasing. That was something that Naruto could definitely do without. Hold that, please, he called to a girl who had just entered the elevator. A plain-looking brunette smiled at him as he darted inside the doors as they closed. Thanks. No problem, she said. She seemed nice enough for Naruto's tastes. It was a far cry from the treatment he received back home. Not for the first time did the blonde boy think about what life might be like outside of Konoha. It certainly had its appeals. The general treatment was only one part. I've been going up and down all day, the girl said, making small talk. Really? Naruto asked, trying to sound interested. Live the role, he reminded himself. What for? Oh, I run errands for a few of the tenants here. Naruto shrugged slightly. Sounds, well, I don't want to say boring. The brunette giggled appreciatively. No, it is. Some of the tenants have the most mundane errands that need running. One of them constantly needs his clothes cleaned. Naruto chuckled, appreciating the small blush that moved up on the girl's cheeks as he brushed against her slightly. No one had ever accused him of being ugly. I can only imagine why. The girl shrugged slightly. Oh, I don't know, but half of the time I think the man just needs his things dried. They're always soaked. I mean, I know we're next to the sea, but the amount of water he gets into his clothes is just ridiculous. You'd think he played with water all day. Maybe he's a fisherman, Naruto suggested as the girl stepped out of the elevator. They were going to the same floor. No, I don't think so, the brunette argued. Most fishermen aren't paid nearly enough to rent one of these apartments. That and he's out at odd hours. I don't even want to think about all the times I've been called at my parents' house to pick something up from the docks for him. Maybe he works for the shipping company that's based out of here, Gata Corporation? Naruto inquired politely. The girl nodded, almost melancholically as she strolled down the hallway, Naruto in tow. I think so. A lot of the tenants in the building do. I'm not quite sure what they do though. The apartments cost too much for regular shipping hands, but some of the men are so big that I can't think of anything else they could do. Naruto hummed thoughtfully as the duo stopped outside one of the rooms. The girl knocked 3 times. The door was answered by a youngish-looking man dressed in a loose t-shirt and black pants. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the hand hidden behind the man's back. It almost certainly held a knife. "Ah, Ami," he addressed the brunette. "You're here for the laundry?" "Of course, Kawasaki-sama. It's the usual pickup time, isn't it?" The man looked thoughtful for a moment before his eyes lit up in remembrance. "Ah, so it is. I see you've brought a friend to help you." He gestured to Naruto. "How do you do, Kawasaki-sama? My name is Uzumaki Naruto," Naruto introduced himself. "Uzumaki, that name sounds familiar. I wonder," the man trailed off in thought. "Gendo," a coarse voice yelled from inside the apartment. "What's keeping you? We have business to discuss." "I'll just be a minute," Gendo called back. Now, where were we? "The laundry, Kawasaki-sama?" Ami prompted. "Yes." That, he turned to enter the apartment, no doubt to gather his laundry. Naruto moved to step in behind him, but Ami blocked his way, and he ended up pushing the girl into the retreating man. Metal flashed briefly in the light of the room before it was concealed once more. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Kawasaki-sama," the girl apologized as Gendo's body hit the floor. Naruto felt a brief surge of satisfaction before the body burst into water. He cursed explosively as the floor was soaked and his reflexes kicked into high gear. "Move," he commanded the girl in front of him as he pushed her further into the apartment. It wasn't a moment too soon as the space they had occupied a moment before was peppered with shuriken. "Motherfucker!" Ino cursed as she dropped her cloaking genjutsu, her impersonation of the local girl finished, and dove behind a nearby bookcase. The brunette was no longer in existence, having been replaced by Ino in full combat gear, tanto in hand. Naruto rolled right the second he had secured Ino, and brought twin kunai up to block an overhead slash of a blunted tanto. The boy locked eyes with Team 10's second target for the day, Funino Futaba. "Contact Kiba," Naruto shouted back to his teammate. The dog ninja had to know that Kawasaki was making a run for it. In his haste to order his teammate, Naruto ignored his quarry, and the former IWA ninja used his free hand to land a solid cross-punch on Naruto's face. The blonde boy was sent spiraling into the glass window looking out at an adjacent building. The reflection of his target made to stab Naruto, and the boy dove to the left, watching as the blunted blade broke through the glass with ease. He was glad he moved. Shifting into a defensive stance, Naruto readied his twin kunai. The IWA Nukenin came high with his slash, and Naruto blocked with his left kunai. His arm shook from the weight of the blow, but he endured, striking out with his right blade. The knife was halted by the man's hand, and the ninja made to throw Naruto. The blonde avoided the inevitable by stepping inside the man's guard, throwing off his sense of balance, and kneeing the larger man in the gut brutally. The blow succeeded in knocking the wind out of the man, and he stumbled backwards. Naruto made to end the fight then and there, but was halted by a hastily thrown kunai at point-blank range. Only his reflexes saved his head, and Naruto grimaced as the blade dug into his left shoulder painfully. "Where the fuck is Ino?" he screamed mentally. The lapse allowed for the Nukenin to regain his bearings, and he struck out with an open palm to Ino's neck. The genin stumbled back in pain, and was powerless to stop the follow-up thrust kick to his stomach that sent him crashing into a wall. Futaba grabbed his tanto to deliver the coup de grace, but was forced to abort the strike as Ino reasserted herself in the fight. "About damn time," Naruto groused internally as he regained his bearings. A quick stab to the man's right shoulder had him screaming in pain, but Ino couldn't do much more as she was brutally slammed into a glass table via 2 elbows to the face and a thrust kick when the man didn't bother to turn around to face her. The interruption had allowed Naruto to reclaim his breath, however, and he kicked out from his prone position. The kick knocked the man to the floor, and gave Naruto the time to quickly stand, flipping himself to his feet from his hands. It wasn't a moment too soon as he leapt over a sweep of his legs and engaged the man in a hasty taijutsu exchange. Naruto's taijutsu was probably better than the man's, but the difference in strength and the confined space limited Naruto's ability to land decent blow on the IWA Nuke Nin, and he soon had his arm caught in a grapple. The man used his superior strength to grab Naruto by the collar and slam him into a glass cabinet before pushing him back into the wall. Naruto grunted as glass shards penetrated his skin, and braced himself with his arms as he hit a doorframe. He grabbed hold like it was a lifeline, and sent a low-thrust kick at the man's left knee. It connected solidly, and Naruto regained the initiative as he swept the Nuke Nin's legs as the man struck out with a desperate punch. It succeeded in distracting Naruto for one precious second. Futaba recovered quickly, and landed a heavy kick to Naruto's stomach that had the boy hunched over in pain. An elbow to the back of the head sent the blonde boy to the ground. Naruto rolled out of the way of the man's attempt to stomp on him, and grabbed a thick book from nearby. It wasn't a moment too soon, as the man had picked up a discarded metal table leg and swung it toward Naruto's head. The book absorbed the first blow, and Naruto rolled right to avoid the second as he kicked at Futaba's legs. The kick pushed the man back enough for Naruto to stand, and the boy sent a wicked cross-punch across the man's face before he slammed the book into the man's foot. Arg, the man bit out as the heavy tome nearly broke his foot. Naruto pressed his advantage by thrusting the tome into the man's neck and pushing him back into a glass cabinet. He snarled in satisfaction as the man was forced to drop the table leg. Naruto slammed his hand into the book, pushing it harder against the Nuke Nin's neck, before rotating it and using it to deliver a vicious blow to the man's face. Two solid haymakers sent the man stumbling to the wall, where Naruto pinned him by the neck. The boy ducked swiftly to avoid a desperate punch to the face, and caught his opponent in the stomach with a powerful uppercut. Naruto used all his body weight to spin the man round and throw him to the floor of the apartment, but found himself airborne when the man kicked out with both legs and caught him in the chest. The Nuke Nin flipped to his feet deftly and picked up his old table leg before he stumbled, once, glancing down at a blade sticking out of him in shock. He fell to his knees with a look of shock etched on his face, blood pouring from a gaping wound in his neck. Ino withdrew her tanto from the man's neck, breathing heavily and looking panicked. Blood spurted from the wound and the blonde girl stumbled backwards as she took in the sight of her kill. The tanto fell to the ground with a sharp clang. "You couldn't have done that earlier?" Naruto grumbled as he gingerly rose to his feet, having already brushed off the man's rather gruesome death. It was him or them. He clutched his chest in pain as he surveyed the damage done to the apartment. His eyes found Ino's shocked sea-foam green orbs staring down at the dead man. "Hey," he said gently as he approached the girl. "You all right?" He laid his hand on her shoulder in a comforting gesture. The touch seemed to break the girl from whatever stupor she was in, and she locked eyes with Naruto. "Why yeah. Just shaken up a bit." Naruto nodded. Didn't quite go as planned, but it worked out in the end. His eyes found the bleeding body on the floor and he grimaced. He would no doubt have the image etched into his memory. The only thing keeping him from collapsing right now was the leftover adrenaline from the fight. He had no doubt that he would be freaking out right now if it were under normal circumstances. He had made kills before, even on this mission, but he still wasn't used to the idea. It didn't matter that he hadn't been the one to actually make the kill this time, the whole experience was shocking enough. Ino leaned against him gingerly as her breathing stabilized. "Yeah, it did," she breathed. She was still staring at the cooling corpse in a muted sort of shock. "What happened to the other guy?" "Kiba should have gotten him if he left the building." Naruto pressed a finger to his ear, where his radio was. "Kiba, what's your status?" The sound of crackling came over the comlink. "S'all good, Naruto." "Me and Akamaru got him," Kiba boasted. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief as the tension rapidly left his body. "Good to hear. Where are you guys?" "Just across the street from you guys. We chased the fucker to the rooftop before we got the drop on him." Naruto glanced out the shattered window to see a dark form waving at him from atop the closest building. "He's still alive?" "Yeah," came the dog ninja's reply. Akamaru yipped in the background. "Good. Bag him and tag him. We'll let Asuma talk to him when we get back. Copy that. You guys all right over there? Kiba questioned, concern marring his voice. Naruto sighed and glanced about the ruined apartment. He was more than a little surprised to find that Ino had somehow made her way into his arms in a comforting hug. Yeah, we're fine. We'll meet you back at Tazuna's. See you guys there. Naruto glanced at the girl in his arms with confusion and a little trepidation. He wasn't used to such contact, and it made him a little nervous. He didn't particularly feel like pulling away though. Ino? Yeah, came the muffled reply. Her face was buried in his shoulder. You sure you're all right? She picked her head out of its resting place and locked eyes with him for a moment. She looked away just as quickly. Yeah, it's just that, it happened so fast. I couldn't do anything and you were getting hurt in dash. Ino, Naruto shushed her. It's all right. I'm fine. We got the job done. She slapped him on the chest. Idiot, I don't care about the mission. You almost died. Naruto sighed heavily, realizing just how close to death he had come in the fight. He had a long way to go if he wanted to go toe-to-toe with S-ranked monsters. Maybe, but you bailed me out when it mattered. That's all that matters now, he comforted somewhat uneasily. He wasn't used to doing this at all. The blonde girl just buried her head back in his shoulder and squeezed him. Naruto smiled gently as his heart fluttered at the notion that Ino actually cared about him. Their teasing was all in good fun, but realizing that he had people that genuinely cared about him made him happier than he had been in a long time. It only helped that it was Ino, of all people. Hold on, he said gently as he channeled chakra. The girl gripped him even tighter as he made a single hand seal and let the shunshin carry them.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.